So they were starting a lot of their online social media stuff through their Facebook group around 2017. That's when things got really, I would say, energized, and people started to like come together and discuss what could be done. Going back to 2017, a friend of mine, I'm still friends with, Stephen Clyde. He was one of the earliest people there. He was, talking, making recommendations and this, that. And we also met him at Mises U in 2019. He was there as well, which is really cool. Okay. So a lot of these people who are part of the early group actually were at Mises U 2019. And that's when, things started to get very heavy. But people were more actively discussing this in 2017 on a smaller scale, and then kind of grew on social media past that time. It was during that time, especially in 2017, that Michael was kind of just going everywhere and anywhere he could to try to shake hands and network and see who would he get to come in. And that's when they even talked back then. It was trying to get him on Dave Smith's Part of the Problem podcast, which they did back then. So it was kind of this burgeoning, kind of decentralized group of people doing whatever they could to try to bring together people under this idea of having a Ron Paul 2.0 decentralized revolution.
The opinions and attitudes expressed by guests on the Fountainhead Forum do not necessarily reflect the opinions and attitudes of the Fountainhead Forum or the opinions and attitudes of Chris Baker. Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 244. We're talking to Jack Lloyd. This is Jack's second time. We're going to talk about his projects. He's doing a lot of making videos and putting out comic books. But I also wanted to bring him on because he was involved with the early days of the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus here in the USA, and I thought this was something worth discussing. How are you, Jack?
I'm doing overall okay. I had a little bit of a rough weekend. I got sick for a little bit, a quick fever, but powered through it. Slept in, took some vitamins and supplements, and now I'm on that little tail end of it, fortunately. So got to beat it in just a couple of days. So.
And you all survived both the hurricanes.
Yeah, we survived both hurricanes. The first one, took off a gate door, and one tree was knocked down from neighbors into ours. And the second one, we didn't have any trees knocked into our house. So we had one little loose shingle, and we had a little bit of flooding issue that we were able to circumvent with some special flood barriers. But overall, we took some precautions to mitigate that for the future. So I think we're pretty solid.
Yeah, it's funny. After it happens once, you kind of prepare for it. And then of course it never happens again, but oh well. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. Cause you're in the middle of Florida somewhere, but I don't think you necessarily want to say where you are, but that's Florida's a big state, but yeah. So anyway, Jack, you've been involved with the Liberty movement for a long time. And I guess you were involved with the early days of the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. What can you tell me about that?
Sure. I mean, in terms of the LPMC, we were early believers in the vision that Michael had shared. Certainly, there was quite a few people who we knew at the time or were friendly with who were being involved with it. Originally, of course, we were just there in kind of social media sense, just taking a look at what they were doing, kind of supporting and sharing, different things about what they were doing. We met it with Michael at the Mises Institute in 2019 and talked quite a bit there, and then had seen him throughout the years at different events, Libertarian Party events and other things. And in the course of that, we were generally excited about their ideas, financially supported them, definitely promoted their merch and different things. I spoke at an event for them on behalf of the Ron Paul reunion event. And we've done various things throughout the years, like put in flyers from them into our event bags and other things like that. Obviously, I've been on their shows. I've consulted them on different things, helping them with, basically both the organization and things that they were doing for social media online things. So,
well, yeah. So when, what, and how long, and when were you ever involved with the Libertarian Party? Or I don't know, how much have you been involved?
Generally, I would say since 2007. That's when I had kind of my first introduction to it as a student, as an undergraduate student. And that was, of course, through the Libertarians on campus. And so that kind of brought me in to what the Libertarian Party stuff is all about. And so, for that, it was more of like a student aspect, just learning along the way, nothing too crazy. And so I saw and met with, at the time, it was Bob Barr, who was, kind of the figurehead of that time. Not saying anything about him, whether he's crazy libertarian or not.
Barr ran for president in 2008, yes.
Yeah, he was just he was kind of the figure at the time, just like they have different major figures, especially for presidency or candidates. So, loosely throughout the years, going to different events as they would come up, mostly originally as, just a participant, and someone who's just interested in it generally. And then later on as someone who would help with different things, whether it was taking headshots for candidates, performing at an event, donating items to different affiliates where they use those items for, charitable fundraisers for them, helping consult on different things, some things that they didn't even use, speaking for them, like at Pork Fest, being brought out for affiliates, to actually be a part of the MC, and actually hosting and stuff like that. So, the level of activity has always, changed throughout the years. I've just never been an elected officer or candidate or anything like that. And the main reason is just that we value our privacy. And so we like to do things where we don't have to give our privacy up, but we could still be a support, financially or this or that,
Yeah,
the
there are lots of different ways you can help. And it sounds like, I don't know, have you ever been a delegate or,
No, we don't participate in anything that is that would compromise our privacy. So, like we were at the 2024 convention, but we were there tabling. So we purchased a table and all that good stuff. And we offered, to volunteer for different things, but they turned us down. So, that was that.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I didn't realize being a delegate compromised privacy, but it depends on. But if you really, I think you're the first person I ever talked to who got involved with the Libertarian Party through a student group or at college.
Yeah,
and that really makes me wonder what they're doing. I don't know why they wouldn't try to set up more college groups, or if that's ever been an effort. I know that's not an easy task. Want privacy, that maybe that is the case anyway. Well, you do get on mailing lists, so that can, because usually if you want to get a college group going, you have to get a faculty advisor because the faculty advisor will keep its stability. Otherwise, you've got constant turnover every 4 years. Because I've heard the same thing, with Toastmasters clubs at colleges, why they aren't that stable too. But anyway, so this is where we are right now. I think the Mises Caucus was certainly off the ground in 2019. But when did you first connect with Michael Heiss?
So they were starting a lot of their online social media stuff through their Facebook group around 2017. That's when things got really, I would say, energized, and people started to like come together and discuss what could be done. Going back to 2017, a friend of mine, I'm still friends with, Stephen Clyde. He was one of the earliest people there. He was, talking, making recommendations and this, that. And we also met him at Mises U in 2019. He was there as well, which is really cool. Okay. So a lot of these people who are part of the early group actually were at Mises U 2019. And that's when, things started to get very heavy. But, people were more actively discussing this in 2017 on a smaller scale, and then, kind of grew on social media past that time. It was during that time, especially in 2017, that Michael was kind of just going everywhere and anywhere he could to try to shake hands and network and see who would he get to come in. And that's when they even talked back then. It was trying to get him on Dave Smith's Part of the Problem podcast, which they did back then. So it was, kind of this burgeoning, kind of decentralized group of people doing whatever they could to try to bring together people under this idea of having a Ron Paul 2.0 decentralized revolution.
That seems to be the common theme I constantly hear about, is we want to reignite the Ron Paul revolution, whatever that means. You were at Mises U. I thought Mises U was only for you all. Would have been way past being students, though, right? So how'd you get into Mises U, or how'd that work out?
Mises U is open to anybody. You don't just have to be a student.
Okay.
you can get a student scholarship as a student. You can get a scholarship as a special guest, or you might just be a paying member, which cost can be, if you pay total retail, could be $3,000 or more. We were brought in as special guests. We were there. Both me and Pho were there as special guests for that 2019 event.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I know I went to the Rothbard graduate seminar back in 2003, and they had what they called an observer space, and I paid maybe around $600 or $700, which included, participating and a shared dorm with somebody. So that wasn't really a bad deal, since that covered, the cost in most of my stay. So I think I went out to eat a few times. I was pretty much, and I lived in Ohio at the time, so I did drive. It was a long drive, but I did drive down to Auburn. But yeah, so that was and of course it was summer, so that was an interesting show. I'm sure if I jar people's memory, they will remember me, because that was several weeks after the final episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I wore a Buffy t-shirt every day, and I had different ones. But anyway, so yeah, but that was a while back, and that was a good event, definitely, and they certainly attract a pretty good crowd, very international. Although I got to tell you, the Rothbard graduate seminar, all male.
Yeah,
Europeans,
that's pretty typical.
South Americans, Canadians. It was a diverse group outside of that, but yeah. So this was at the Mises U. So this was one thing. When they say they wanted to reignite the Ron Paul revolution? First of all, did that mean they just wanted to run somebody for president and lose again, or what? Because I always kind of scratch my head when I hear this term Ron Paul revolution, just because. What was the revolution?
The idea of having grassroots people actually get out there in the culture, doing ethics and economics education, especially Austrian economics, using the opportunity for running candidates to actually teach people these things, kind of like what Javier Milei actually did and does.
Yes.
And to do issue coalitions with other groups, especially on the local and state levels. So the idea of not necessarily working with another political organization in terms of aligning values, but rather on a single issue like decriminalization of mushrooms or something like that, or working with a group for specifically constitutional carry. So issue specific things, coalitions to get things through to fight the government, whether it's nullification, secession, or ballot amendments, those kind of things. And then on the presidential scale, the idea is just simply to have that person who could go onto the different podcasts and alternative media circuits and present this message well, which for them at the time, their hope was that Dave Smith would be the one to do that. Of course, he didn't. And because of that, they lost all their support for their efforts, because they kind of ended up pushing that as their main thing, to the point of losing, I would say, their branding on the rest of everything they did. So once they lost that, a lot of people kind of stopped supporting the caucus, and then they were in financial dire straits after that.
Are you saying because Dave Smith didn't run for president, or
yes.
Was this earlier? Okay.
Because Dave Smith, because they put so much effort into focusing on him and essentially making him almost the caucus in a sense, because they just wrapped it up so much in him when he said he wasn't going to run. That disappointed people, because they thought, oh, okay, he's going to go and do this thing that, you're going to go and have the messenger. So that lost a lot of their, I guess you could say, excitement and people's interest in doing what they were focusing on more, even though that wasn't what the caucus wasn't in totality. They're pigeonholing themselves further and further in that direction ended up causing a major disappointment. Yeah.
But this was a lot later, it sounds like to me do you think this really just came about because of the, Rand Paul's failed presidential run, or was it kind of just people who were involved with that and then looked for something to do after that, or what? So
Michael Heiss specifically was a ground level activist. he's not an academic. He's not someone who was wealthy or anything like that. He just was really passionate about the spirit of the Ron Paul activism. So he wanted to kind of bring that energy and fire back to Libertarian Party, especially because the LP had gotten so left or socially left in terms of their messaging to the point of absurdities, which I agreed with as well. And then, of course, they were terrible on holding the government accountable on the lockdowns and shutdowns. So
yeah, I'm trying to. I'd like to stay back around 17 or 18 first before we go into, because so I mean, we go back to say 17 or 18 with I mean, we certainly seen some leftward messaging there, but do you think there was maybe did they get involved with groups like YAL or Students for Liberty or some of those other groups that seem to be out there now, or what was their?
Those are totally different organizations and completely separate. Students for Liberty is its own kind of thing, and obviously they're more campus oriented. And YAL is, of course, a student organization as well, especially, and they specifically focus on Republican races. So I would say those organizations are completely different and separate in character, compared to what the Mises Caucus was doing, which is especially focused on the Libertarian Party and adults.
So from the beginning, the Mises Caucus thought, let's figure out a way to take over the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, the goal was to reintroduce Ron Paul's messaging and Austrian economics as at the forefront of the Libertarian Party, because the general sentiment was that these focuses had been lost to a bunch of fringe messaging ideas that aren't really what people need to hear about when it comes to the core ways that the government screws us. And originally, it was supposed to be against the cultural battle aspect. Originally, it was supposed to be step out of the culture war, focus on economics, focus on ethics, focus on ending the Fed, focus on how the government's stealing our money constantly and we're just so broke, ending the wars, that kind of stuff. It was supposed to be abstracted from the left-right culture war originally. Of course, that is not the case anymore.
Yeah. What I've noticed is that when the economy is bad, people focus on the economy. And when the economy is good, the people tend to not worry about it, so they do focus on other things. Maybe that's why. Maybe the LP thought that because we were in better economic times, that was maybe why they went more with a. But yeah, I know what you're saying about the LP going in more of a social justice direction, or at least embracing people who are more. And that's not to say that I think those people certainly have a place in the Libertarian Party. I mean, people who want to, because obviously libertarianism is a philosophy that's open to everybody. But I think when it seems like to me something went off the rails in the overall liberty movement. I mean, there was the business that happened in Charlottesville. And then there was when Jeff Deist made that speech and used the words blood and soil, and then a bunch of people like Steve Horwitz and others, threw tantrums about, oh my God, he used the words blood and soil. That seemed to create a divide. And that was Charlottesville was 2017.
Might have been. I don't remember the exact time off the top of my head, but I think you might be right.
Well, I'm just wondering, the Unite the Right riot in Charlottesville, which was Unite the Right riot, and that was and there was a lot of crazy stuff there, but it seemed like that was in 2017.
Yeah.
And it seemed like we already had a certain contingent of people who had called themselves libertarians, who were no longer using that word, or kind of saying that libertarianism was something else. I mean, Molyneux came out for Trump, and some other people who had really been a solid libertarian, and some other people had. What do you think? What do you think caused that? What do you think this had something to do with it? I mean, what do you think caused the whole? What is it? It seems like, because I know I've talked to people in that. And the LP also said that Sarwark eventually went on the offensive against some of these people. Like Ken Molman will tell me a story about how Sarwark told him, "Oh, I just went after Tom Woods on Twitter today," or something like that. So when do you think this? When did you notice this started happening, or did you not notice anything like that?
Well, these reactionary swings are not unique. They're common.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending pendulum until people step out of it. Of if you have a lot of leftist ideas and social messaging, right,
Yeah.
starting to permeate the culture, it creates a right-wing reaction to that.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, if you have suddenly a lot of right-wing control in terms of social controls and messaging in government, then you create in response to that, the left side of social reaction. So it's not unusual. This has happened many times. It's even happened many times in the past 8 years. What's going to be the core issue there is that if someone is not grounded in libertarian voluntarist ethics and thinking outside of state controls, they're going to then prioritize their pet issue over everything else. So it no longer becomes about getting government out of it and getting the theft out of it. Is that they start to rationalize the government doing certain things in a state central planning mindset if it fits their version of social control that they have their preference or predilections for. So that is really what takes place there. And of course, there's also another element in certain characters. I think Stefan's one of them. Is that when you get up to a certain age for some of these people, you start to feel desperate, just like Rothbard did, I think, when he was older. And you start to think, oh, this stuff's not going to happen in my lifetime. I need to do something and compromise and pander and reach more people. And if I do this and I pander in that way, I'm going to get more views. I'm going to get more, people to listen to me. So I think that that's very common, that people who feel scared, they feel desperate, they feel afraid of the future coming and nothing being done to change for liberty, then they give into that and they start to compromise and start to rationalize state theft and violence in ways that betrays their otherwise long history of being against those things, Molyneux included. So the consequences of that, though, are inescapable. It's almost like an economic deduction. There is a problem with compromising there, where if you start to pander, yes, you will build up interest in your stuff, but then the people who are there for the wrong reasons. They're not there for principled reasons. They're usually sophistic, and then they will cannibalize you and your messaging, because now those people are actually against you, and they will not accept your messaging if you say anything against it. And so then you just kind of nullified your work and downgraded that reach and confused people on what the ideas are, because now you've intertwined state central planning with this idea of, well, I don't want the government controlling, but I do now. So I think that always is self-collapsing. It's not able to be escaped from. If you do that, you will destroy your fan base. You will also lose what you were hoping to achieve, possibly, which is changing minds, for principled libertarian thinking. And happens time and again, whenever that takes place. So social changes are dynamic. People change their minds and think different things through time based on circumstances. So those ebbs and flows keep going as more and more people get exposed to these ideas and challenge and this or that. And so you have a growth of people who are engaged in Austrian economics or libertarian ideas. But there's also people who get swept away in the process, and they get bought into or caught up in outside organizations and resources and ideas. And then, you have that kind of ebb and flow of people in and out.
Jack, I think I've noticed now with a lot of libertarians that and maybe it applies to all thinkers, but they eventually have a jump the shark moment. And after the jumping of the shark, you just forget anything they did after that. And Rothbard was on the staff at Liberty Magazine in its early days, where I used to work in the late 80s. And he eventually quit that, and Bill Bradford and other people saw that happen. And I just said, okay, this is the end of Rothbard. So from late 89 to his death, we can just forget that happened. And I've done that with some other people. It's almost as if they're doing a lot of good, and then they just either stop doing good work or something silly happens. I mean, I often say that maybe with Ayn Rand, it happened when she broke up with Nathaniel Branden, but it's,
That's a good one.
It's really, it's unfortunate, but that doesn't take away from the good work that they did. And after they're gone, and long after they're gone, you tend to remember the good work that they did and forget the ending that wasn't as fun. And back in the 90s, we never would have considered we definitely didn't consider the Mises Institute to be that libertarian, and they were not friendly to Liberty magazine at all. But I've also noticed, the Libertarian Party is this group of people where I think everybody cares about a lot of the same issues. But if I have, my 10 issues and somebody else has their 10 issues, my number 1 issue might be somebody else's number 10 issue, and that person's number 1 issue might be my number 10 issue. And that's where these fights happen over how important the issues are. I mean, some people are in the LP because they want to legalize marijuana. Some people are in the LP because they want to lower their taxes. And it does create a conflict of, okay, which do we go after first? And, sometimes I'll even get into heated debates, do you think the income tax is worse, or do you think property taxes are worse? It's so you have a lot. It seems like to me, though, the conversation in the Liberty Movement has really broken down to a level that just where everything has gotten very ugly, and that wasn't an issue 20 years ago. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's always been an issue. It's just more amplified in social media. The conflicts of late are very specific, and I'm very privy to what they are and how they operate. So how this all works is that there are people who come into the liberty space who, for whatever reason, they have some existing following or some type of interest in them. Maybe they're on a certain podcast, or they're a comedian, or maybe they had some market success in something, and they're new to the ideas relatively. Like, it's been something they've only been thinking about or doing something with for a couple of years. And then they want to make a name for themselves. And so they go and they call themselves the libertarian, fill in the blank after, or the liberty, whatever, they use the monikers of libertarian liberty because they know that they can be, a relative big fish in a small pond, get lots of people to like and engage with their stuff, because lots of people are thirsty in the space for a figure who's successful that they could look up to. Because a lot of people who are in the liberty movement feel frustrated and feel powerless. And sometimes it's like they want a superhero, essentially, to help lead the way. So these people who come in, they'll give some lip service and they'll play the game of saying taxation is theft, and they'll say different things that sound really libertarian, but in truth, psychologically, they haven't actually given up their collectivism. They still deep down hold on to their Republican baggage, Democrat Party baggage, whatever it is. They don't really know how to consistently think of solutions outside the state. They will use pandering that is collectivist because it gets them more engagement. And especially on social media, especially on Twitter, now X, that's rewarded. If you say really wild things, really crazy and offensive things and collectivist things, by playing to existing prejudices or biases, you will be rewarded with likes. And if you're rewarded with likes or shares, then those people say, oh, look at this, I'm going to get more engagement this way. And so they lose sense of whatever direction they may have started in, and they go back to their old ways because they're like, well, I'm going to just keep doing this because I want to be popular. I want to be accepted. I want to get that, 1,000 likes. I want to be able to get 5 million impressions and get my, monetization on. So it's very easy and very tempting for people who chase that kind of clout, who chase that type of resourcing, to compromise. And the reason why they keep doing it is because if they go back on it, they'll alienate those people, right? So once you've aggregated people who are there for the wrong reasons, it's very difficult to maintain that audience and reach out to them. You'll be deaded on your post if you actually say something principled, because now all your collectivist following is really not there for the right reasons, and they're not going to engage with you when you say something that actually is important and good.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have today, unfortunately, is the incentives of social media being pretty bad, in terms of, how people chase those rewards. And so it's not that social media itself is bad. It's just that, when you're trying to do outreach for liberty, you have to be more creative and innovative and cunning with how you do your content to reach people. And, some people just see that shortcut of being like, well, you know what? It's more popular to say conservative things right now, or it's more popular to say Republican things right now. So if I say those things, I'm going to get on this podcast, or I'm going to get invited to CPAC, or I'm going to get, invited to speak and be given $16,000 to come to whatever organization. So I know this well, because we're in this, we are, at that level of permeation, notoriety, and we suffer for it because we refuse to be bought out. People tell us, "Oh, you'd be so great in the Republican Party." This and that. Well, yeah, we're not doing that. So it's always there, and it's tempting, especially to those who are financially insecure, because they're like, "Well, I gotta feed my kid, so I gotta keep doing this thing," and it's very devastating. It's very tragic, and I think that the more people realize that these are people compromising because of bad incentives, I think the better people will do at realizing that, okay, you know what, we really should value consistency and principled promotion of ethics and economics. And I think that those who are in these organizations where they supposedly want these things would be wise to not invite those compromising people and those, oh, I just became libertarian last week people, to come speak at their events and to headline their events and to poach their members and confuse people. And that's what happens, is that all these people chasing that quick clout invite essentially these wolves in sheep's clothing to come to their events, and then they say opposite messaging, and then they literally demean and minimize principled libertarians and call them, autistic and stupid and losers. And it's crazy because they take this self-shame and they project it onto libertarians. And then all these people who are organizing these LP affiliate chapters and other types of groups, similar groups, are like, well, why does nobody want to come out? Why does nobody want to support us anymore? And it's like, look what you did. You invited in people who have this very limited history, who very easily can be shown that they're going to flake on you, that they're going to betray you. Yeah. There's no consistency there. And then, you bring them in, you give them attention, you give them money, you give them potentially people who could be poached away by their sophistry. And then you're surprised when, oh, wow, we just had a huge exit of people, wanting to support us because of the confused messaging and the House divided resources. So this is an organizational thing that transcends libertarianism. It's not like it's, specific to libertarianism. This type of poor choices is something that can happen to any type of corporate or business or association, form. If you divide your house, don't be surprised when you suddenly don't have the membership and resources to sustain it. It's that simple. So.
Yeah, Jack, somewhere we went from, saying something like, this is a horrible idea. Your research is lousy. That paper isn't very good. And that now just evolves to you're an evil person. And I don't know where it didn't happen overnight, but there's something else but getting back to where it seems like to me there was a concern. There was definitely a social, and really I like to say social vengeance warrior infiltration into the LP of looking for words, because it's the analogy I now use is, and granted you shouldn't do this. I mean, I can't make it's not nice to make a joke about somebody who's in a wheelchair, but they'll get more upset about somebody who makes a joke about somebody who's in a wheelchair than, say, the drunk driver who caused the car accident that put that person into the wheelchair. Who's more evil in this case? And they get more upset about they get more upset about somebody making an off-color joke about African Americans than they do about slave auctions happening in Libya. I mean, that's what gets me, and I think that really shows a lot of crazy priorities.
Well, I mean, language policing is something that is not even unique to the left side. Obviously, in recent times, there's extreme forms of language policing, in the name of having the cultural kind of Marxist class theory, gender theory, be maintained and pushed out there. But it's something that I think goes across the board, especially anyone who's in a collectivist mindset. There's always going to be someone's version of their taboo or their thing that you can't step out of line on. And that happens even in the libertarian space, quite a bit. What are the things of recent that even I personally am just like, okay, like this is, really seeing the NPC level analysis is talking about the situation of Israel and Gaza, for example. So if you, for example, language policing on the libertarian side, if you didn't call that a genocide, then you're basically the devil himself, right? So, for example, I wouldn't call it a genocide. I'd say it's an escalation of violence. And I think that a lot of those aspects are unwarranted and innocent people are dying. I think there's bad things happening, but I don't consider this a true, like, okay, the goal is to actually kill everybody, and that's the aim. And that kind of thing. But if I don't say that, then I'm the devil. So that's an example of how this leftist collectivist policing can happen even within libertarian spaces over seemingly libertarian issues, where if you don't say the words, if you don't say what it is that's the current thing, then you should be ostracized and you're terrible and evil. And funnily enough, the people who are calling you this are just a bunch of keyboard warriors themselves. They've never actually done a day of Middle East reporting on the ground. They've never fought for anybody's liberty physically themselves. They're just on the internet, basically regurgitating whatever the UN says or Al Jazeera. So this is, it's something that I think comes especially from those who still have a very big collectivist default. You know what I mean? As opposed to someone who kind of has an individualist Ayn Randian default. If you have a collectivist default on the right side or left side, and very common people who are former leftists call themselves libertarians now, they engage in that collectivist language structure. If you don't say this thing right now, if you don't use the words, you're the enemy. You're the devil. You need to be ostracized.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful in-group, out-group tactic to get rid of people who don't follow along with whatever that particular talking head, figurehead group, wants to enforce on people.
Yeah, getting back to the Mises Caucus, I didn't go to. I thought about going to national in 2018, but I didn't make it. But one thing that that came out was, they claimed that they could get Ron Paul and Judge Napolitano to speak at LP National in 2018, and they were going to have their fees paid, and and the logistics didn't work out, and yet this was held up as a reason why the people running the LP weren't fit to run the LP, at least as far as the Mises Caucus is concerned. And I also want to cite another example of something like this that happened elsewhere. There was Martha Bueno in Florida, said it at the 2022 LP Florida convention, I can get Milei there. And again, the logistics didn't work out, but Martha used that as this is evidence that the people who run LP Florida aren't fit to run LP Florida. I mean, where did this game come from of, oh, you won't invite my speaker, therefore you're bad, come from? I mean, when did this start? I mean, has there been other examples of this? But this to me is just, it's silly. But
yeah, I mean, I would say it's silly, and just the idea of, okay, if you don't get this speaker, then you're all bad.
Yeah,
I would say independently of that, there's something else though that is more material or substantial, and that is that if there's a group of people who say we won't get a good speaker out of personal spite or bias. So, for example, Ron Paul was specifically ostracized and kept out and mocked and lambasted. So that was a real material thing in terms of, they genuinely were not wanting this person. Of course, Ron Paul did eventually make it out and did speak. I believe 2022 and
but we're talking about 2018.
Right. And in 2018, those people who are in control obviously we're not thrilled with him. So
and from what I've heard, part of the reason why is that he wanted a time he wanted a time slot, and they weren't willing to give him that time slot. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why these things don't happen that have nothing to do with personality.
Certainly, there's certainly many things. It's just that when those people have made clear their intentions otherwise and have said expressly that they don't want that person and that they hate that person, then those other rationalizations don't really add up. It just seems like a veneer, a facade to essentially excuse why they're not bringing the person. And I personally would agree with that was definitely a facade and a veneer trying to rationalize not bringing Ron Paul.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, where the speaker is, I mean, for example, I mean, getting Milei up here to speak at anything is going to be a challenge, just because you're talking about an 8 to 10 hour plane ride. I mean, it's a huge investment of his time. I mean, obviously, it's a lot easier to get Milei to speak at an event in Buenos Aires or even an event in Santiago than it would be to get him to speak anywhere in America. So.
Yeah, well, I also wouldn't have any expectations of Javier Milei doing anything. Why would you? He's literally the president of Argentina. He's not an American politician. And you know what I mean? It's just, to me, I think that would just be absurd on its face. There's no guarantee about getting this person or any expectation. He has no duty to anyone for anything.
True.
So,
But this was a few years ago before he was president. Obviously, he's a lot busier now.
Yeah. I mean, it just is. He's a foreign person to the United States politics. So I just think that whole angle would be silly in the first place.
Well, I don't think it would be silly, because he's by far the most successful libertarian who's ever run for office at this point. But,
yes, it's a great to have him, but it's silly to have an idea that someone has a right to his time and the ability and to be able to promise him. He's an individual person. He's not someone's slave. So no one has a right or an ability to force him to speak. And
I'm mainly saying, though, that this person was willing to pay him off, and this was evidence that the people running the Libertarian Party of Florida are bad. That was which I think is ridiculous. But and then I would say that's
ridiculous. I would say this. I agree. I would say it's ridiculous.
And then we do move forward to 2020. One thing I do ask, apparently Adam Kokesh was also involved with the early days of the Mises Caucus.
No.
Nope.
Okay,
I heard that from somebody else. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask him, but
not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, what was their reasoning? When did Hornberger get involved with the Mises Caucus? When did that start?
When he wanted to do his presidential run, essentially. He was their pick too. Basically he, Hornberger, I like most all his values and views generally. We're aligned maybe 95%. Yeah. He certainly is a good speaker, but obviously he doesn't have a lot of the traditional hallmarks that's desired for a presidential candidate. He's not, near 6 foot. He doesn't have a wife and kids. And while he's certainly educated and has a successful foundation that, maintains a $500,000 amount of funding each year, he doesn't have, I think, the typical things that you would want for a presidential candidate with that type of notoriety and outreach. So, he obviously wanted to be with the Mises Caucus because Mises Caucus was doing relatively well. The Mises Caucus at the time was like, oh, this guy is relatively, again, compared to everybody else, a good candidate. I know there was some difficulties later, working with him within the Mises Caucus, but that's all I have to say about it. I shot his headshot too that he used on his Twitter and stuff. We've generally been, friendly otherwise. And I just think that, that's all there is to it. There's nothing too crazy or special about that. He was just what was considered the better candidates. And that's why Mises Caucus was interested in him.
I really believe that, considering Jacob's abilities, he would be better off as LNC chair than running for president. I don't think he's a politician. I do think that he'd be. I mean, he's obviously done a whole lot of good work for a long time. I also believe he's bilingual, so I naturally ask myself, why doesn't he do more Spanish outreach? I think that would definitely be in. I mean, that's an area where we need him. But anyway, yeah. So he ran, and he was really considered the front runner. But this ended up not getting it, and so the Mises Caucus was still pretty much going along with things because they seemed like they were, just they hadn't taken over. So I think they were playing nice, but the other thing that happened in 2020 was the coronavirus happened. And this is where many people in the Libertarian Party at different levels completely, they just acted like nothing happened. Or the battle came and they disappeared. And suddenly 1/3 of our army was gone, and yet the Mises Caucus and some other parts of the liberty movement were opposed to all this from day one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it was a test of both intelligence and the ability to read through information and to analyze things critically. I think it showed very quickly who was able to take a look at what the government was saying and parse through the data and figure out the lies very quickly. Me and my wife did that right away. We did our own analysis. We have a huge set of articles, like very early, looking at the data out of Italy and other places and things like that. We're some of the earliest people calling out the manipulations on the statistics and the lies. So, for some people, it showed that they didn't have the wisdom and intellectual stamina to really think critically about the situation and to look at it. And they defaulted to trusting the government and going along with propaganda. And, it's one way or another. Either it's for lack of mental fortitude or their proclivity toward trusting the government is too strong. And either way, that's a very bad sign for being a libertarian. If you're a libertarian and you don't distrust the government by default and question and go, okay, I really need to look at this and see what they're actually doing and saying, that's a big problem. So a lot of people had their true colors show, and it showed that they were LINOs, libertarian names only, because when push came to shove, they were acting in fear and they were compromising. And instead of being like, no, the government has no right or ethical authority to shut things down. And not only that, the effects of these things are horrendous on people's ability to thrive and to provide. The economic ignorance, completely, outstandingly crazy on that one. They didn't follow through on their libertarian values, and they reneged on those things, and a lot of people dropped the ball on that, and so it left a wide open opportunity for those who were calling it out right from the beginning to step in and say, hey, this leadership has failed. These people have failed you, and one of the greatest assaults on people's lives and livelihoods, these people failed. And to me, they rightfully deserve to lose those positions. It doesn't mean I'm saying anyone else had a right to those after, but they deserve to lose because that was their ground moment. That was your, okay, here's the test, right? Just like a 1930s, Germany test. Where are you drawing your lines? Are you actually able to perceive what's going on in government? Yes or no? And those people did not. And so they deserved to lose and lose hard. And they did not deserve the positions that they had with failing so badly.
Well, there are two different things here, though. Libertarianism is about politics, laws. Libertarianism is not about whether or not a virus kills a certain number of people. Libertarianism is about being opposed to violent and sadistic policies.
It is specific.
And whether the virus kills 100 people or whether it kills 100 million people, the policies were violent and sadistic. You are committing violence against people who are not doing anything to you.
Right. That's fundamentally the root issue is the government is enacting violence and the government is enacting state central planning of the worst kind and causing even greater harm and not allowing market solutions to come in, which happen organically when there is a problem. Because if you don't allow that and the government distorts the incentives, then they put things into all the wrong solutions, as obviously happened. And it was worse than just the wrong solutions. It was nefarious. It was intentionally wrong solutions. So that is something that is, unforgivable, really. You can't, both the people who did that and those who gave into those lies and didn't take a step back and say, hey, hold on. You know what I mean? While this is a serious situation, there's no excuse for more state control and violence and destroying people's lives and livelihoods in the name of this, right? If it's really that deadly, people are going to react in the market. They're going to say, whoa, this is actually that deadly, like the bubonic plague or something. So they will happily quarantine themselves if it's that, bad. So I think that it was a true test of integrity, and a lot of people failed that, so.
Yeah, and it was about sometime, in 2020 where Angela announced she was running for chair. Is that when the Mises Caucus started to grow? Was in 2020, or where do you think or was it pretty steady up until then?
I think that the caucus really had its first growths, the biggest growths, when they got the buy-in of a lot of the big figureheads. Because in the beginning, a big part of their growth was getting buy-in from a bunch of different people who, had their own clout. Me and my wife included, Dave Smith, Maj Touré, Ron Paul, Tom Woods. Quite a number of people were specifically reached out to, Phil Labonte, even from All That Remains. Like, a lot of people were reached out to try to coalition and to basically use, some of those different people's names or platforms and to integrate it all in to, basically help boost everything, as a total. And so the Mises Caucus then not only became something that became significant because more people joined, but then the caucus itself became so strong because of that, those inputs, that it could boost those other people as well. So it went from, kind of this seed idea to, it's got some interest, to, now that we have this kind of collection of interest from many different parties and people, now we can use that to then leverage it and promote who we want. One big example, of course, was Dave Smith. So they use that clout that they earned by getting in the fandoms of many different people to then promote their preferred people. And with that, they were able to ratchet up, especially through 2020 and 2022, and get the support that they needed to have a successful takeover, which that was a successful takeover in 2022. So I would say the lockdowns and shutdowns certainly put fuel, on that fire. It enabled this collection of people to really be viewed as intelligent and smart, and the right people to listen to, because they were the ones saying, hey, these lockdowns and shutdowns are evil. The mask mandates are evil, shot mandates are evil, right? So there was that wider credibility from this group that was, pretty much consistent throughout, at least at that time, saying no lockdowns, no shutdowns, all this other stuff, while other people were in confusion. So I would say a lot of people resonated with that, and that's a part of what led to that success in 2020.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think the Mises Caucus would have ever been able to take over without the podcasters. I mean, in 2020 and up until maybe last year or so, Tom Woods seemed like he was very interested in what's going on with the Libertarian Party, and now he just doesn't care at all. And
he's totally out of it. He left it years back.
And I don't know if and other podcasters who just weren't on the other side just weren't as big as they were, and that's and then the arena, and then we have some, and then already the takeovers start to happen at the state conventions before they start at the national convention. We had, New Hampshire was in 2021, but then it gradually, and really, and I think this is also just a failure of the people who were there before. They just kept doing the same thing, and they made no adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about the existing regime and the?
I'm talking about the people like that were part of the old that maybe people like Sarwark or Joe Bishop Henchman. I mean, right. I mean, if you're ahead at the end of the third quarter, and then you end up losing, you've got to take a look at yourself and realize you made some mistakes, and that's really where they were. They made lots of mistakes, and obviously so, because they were in it for the wrong reasons. Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Democrats in this past election cycle. They stuck their heads in the sand and talked, lies to each other in their echo chamber, and they didn't really appreciate how much people were angry at their rhetoric and lack of action and failures. So I think that it's important to understand and be reflective about where you're at with different things, and to look and see, you know, what's going on. Now, of course, if you're principled, no matter what, you know what I mean, just the political wind's changing doesn't change anything, you know, in terms of your principled actions and rhetoric. But in this case, those actors were not being principled. And so it was on them to take a look and do self-reflection and to say, okay, how did we goof on this? How did we miss these signs? Okay, what did we do wrong here? But there was no humility there. A lot of people ended up stepping down, and they had their own corruption that, funnily enough, now the LP is kind of re-engaging in. They're doing the things that they were saying were bad about the Prags, which is completely insane. It's like, oh, well, when we do it, it's okay. And I hate that. I hate hypocrisy.
And they seem to feel the only way to oppose the Mises Caucus was to just call them racists over and over again. I mean, which was ridiculous. I mean, and you know what? And I don't know. Obviously we don't know what all the conversations are, but I remember there's a post in one of the groups, and George Phillies actually said, I was telling them if they didn't do a major course correction, they were headed for disaster. And I'm not a fan of Phillies, but Phillies has been around a long time, and he certainly is. He's a smart guy. He said because I saw what happened with Badnarik. But anyway, and so now we're here where we are. And I mean, Reno was the first time in 2022 that I made a sincere effort to be a delegate. And I was really behind Angela, because Angela did all that work opposing this. And now I'm just looking and see, Angela, I'm glad you think outside the box, but this is not what I had in mind when I thought of going outside the box. To her credit, a really great idea Angela recently had is she wants to do roasts. And I said, Angela, that would be great. Let's do a roast once a month online, just roast somebody and keep asking for money during the roast. And I think that would go over really well. But the whole Trump thing is, I think there are going to be a whole lot of side effects from this that we really didn't think about, and it looks like the side effects are going to be very bad. We might get there might be some good things come out of this, but there might be some very bad things come out of this too.
Yeah, and you shouldn't blame yourself for Angela and stuff like that. She changed. She definitely went from one angle of doing things to another. And you can go back to her video like in 2020 on the Jorgensen campaign, and she was literally roasting Trump and saying that he's this lockdown tyrant, and he was pushing Operation Warp Speed, and was raising the debt. So this idea that someone who would think, oh yes, that she wants to make the LP principled and stand against the duopoly was very reasoned. Her history, her 10-year history before, actually signaled that. It was only in the past couple of years that things changed, and in fact, mostly in the past year, especially, that things changed. And a big part of that change was desperation, right? Because the LP had lost so much money, had lost so much membership, and they were struggling to such a great degree that they got desperate. Like, well, let's do a joint fundraising committee with Kennedy. And then the perverse incentives that came from that, if we do this, then we get some people and they give us money and this or that, kept snowballing. And it's pretty obvious that once you set yourself up in that zone, the incentives totally change, because now once you've pandered, you can't betray that, right? You can't go and then be a proponent and then be a critic, because then you're jeopardizing your access, your benefits, the ability to speak, your ability to get potentially money or do any deals. Totally, right? If you go and renege on that and you start to criticize the person that you're doing this joint thing with, you're toast. So now they're stuck. Basically, they can't criticize these people meaningfully, as they should be as libertarians. And they're stuck having to cross their fingers and hope that Trump does something good for them fundamentally. And so far, it's been a lot of coping and moving goalposts, saying, oh, well, RFK is a libertarian. He gave them $1,500 about a lifetime membership, to do their joint fundraiser, to give them hundreds of thousands. So it's really terrible, because now you have this mixed messaging, and you signal to everybody that the LP sucks. The LP can't pick a good candidate. We have to go and just support somebody else. And naturally, you're going to get a lot of people who are like, yeah, why would I support the LP at all? Like, I would just go support the Republican Party, or I'd support an independent candidate, or I'd support the candidate directly. Why would you want to pass through? It makes no sense. So now basically, the organization is going to be bought off by the incentives, because now the incentives are, well, the hardcore libertarians are not thrilled with this. Always vote libertarians. And the only people who might be supporting you a little bit left are just those who are on the edge, who are just like really conservative socially, but they kind of hate the government, but they can't. They're so anti-libertarian though in the optics, and they think they're just cringe and gross, that they're like, oh yeah, okay, well maybe if you support Trump, yeah, he's cool. Even though Trump obviously has made it clear that his picks are not exactly libertarian. I think the cabinet kind of showed that very clearly, that his whole orchestration is a bunch of gun grabbers and by and large, pro AIPAC people who are going to do, unsurprisingly, what we expect, which is, Trump's going to continue to support Israel in every single possible way, which so funny and ironic that these people who are so anti-Israel and, oh, if you say anything good about Israel at all, you're the devil, you're the enemy, you just want genocide. And now they're like, oh, if you don't support Israel's biggest fanboy, you're the problem, right? It's really insane. It's, batshit insane what these people are doing. The double speak that they do is really just vile and maddening. And then they own it, right? They own what they've done, because now they're stuck rocking a hard place. Oh, okay, well, we got to support Trump and whatever he does, but at the same time, we got to criticize him because I got to keep my libertarian street cred. But if I criticize too much, now my new fans are going to be like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're hating on Trump 4D chess. So they screwed themselves. They're locked in a place now where, if they want to chase that money, they're going to have to keep compromising. There's no way around that. Because they've lost their libertarian side pandering. They've lost that core base. So that's what I foresee. I fully expect continuing to sell out and to do this optic of we exist to nominate Republicans. Because if they don't, I think there goes their money tree, whatever little they would get potentially, which I think even that is going to dwindle further, as people, of course, come to terms with the fact that the LP people may not even be needed to win at all. Essentially, if people are just voting on their own, which already kind of happened, right? You look at Gary Johnson's numbers versus Joe Jorgensen's to Chase. Those numbers have definitely dwindled quite a bit, from around 5% to around 1% to about 0.5%, right? And that's not because the LP was doing with Trump. So they've shot themselves in the foot with organizational disloyalty, which is just basic economics of an organization. You can't go and tell people, if you have a certain organization with a certain optic, you can't go and say, hey, these other people are way better than us, go support them. It's like, what are you doing? You're crazy. You're going to lose everything. And they are. So, in the end, they're going to have to keep selling out to stay funded.
There's a lot. I'm not really sure what's going on with the joint fundraising committee and all that stuff, because there's a lot of complexities here. I realize that a lot of this is all more complicated, but what you see on the outside is only a small part of it. But Dave Smith was said he was going to run for president, then he backs out. And I just heard Dave on Lisa Kennedy's show recently, former MTV's Kennedy, and he admitted he never voted for Gary Johnson. He didn't vote for Joe Jorgensen in the last two elections. So I wonder, is Dave ever going to vote for the Libertarian Party candidate?
He's always been
a good question.
He's always been a grifter. We've called him out. I called him out at BCU. Dave was there at BCU. I pushed back on him for years, because I saw from early on that he is a New York Republican. He's never actually given up his collectivism. It comes out always when it's an edge case issue. You watch him say, "Oh, I do anything for my children," and think of the children if it comes to public schooling stuff. He'll be like, "Oh, we should send all troops to the border." He is so violently collectivist in the most traditional Republican conservative sense. And I say this as a former neocon. My backdrop tendencies are the conservative Republican side from my own upbringing. Yeah. So I'm sitting here looking at this yeah, dude, you're literally doing what is so typical of being from that, that place. And he still does it to this day. He was never a libertarian in terms of liking the LP people. The Mises Caucus is what brought him in, and it gave him an opportunity to do a bunch of speaking events, to get paid to go and do comedy shows or this or that. So it was a nice little way to, romp his wallet so he can send his kids to his private school. And that's about it. At the end of the day, he mocks libertarians. He calls them stupid and cringe and autistic. He's very shaming, which is, typical of most comedians who are self-hating people, and they're just projecting their own, self-hate into comedy. But it's just very obvious with him what he does. So that's always been for us just like very annoying and maddening, is that he does both sides. He plays both angles. And meanwhile, people are like, oh, see, he's for us. And it's like, no, he's not really for you guys. He's enjoying the money. He's enjoying the stage presence and opportunities. But in truth, he's going to default, unsurprisingly, to his Republican roots. And that's why it's like, oh, yeah, Trump, he's anti-establishment. Meanwhile, basically it's a whole APEC, cabinet. And he's going to just say, well, I didn't really affect things that much, even though, okay, so why would you make a video about it to tell people to try to push people? I mean, these are the greatest sophists out there right now. And they literally count on people not being able to follow all the BS that they say all day, because they tweet, make video, and they say so much stuff that people can't actually parse through it. And they only see little parts of it, and they don't get the total picture. That they're not sincere beliefs. These are not sincere beliefs. They're reactionary and they're compromised, because it's just at that level, when you're so comfortable, you're like, oh, I've made it. I've had this enough success. They don't want to mess with that success, right? Because fundamentally, right, that's his whole thing is like, oh, I want to be a comedian. I want to make money this way, right? So he's not going to mess with his bread by saying too many principled things if it's going to upset the audience that he's created, right? And that's a perverse incentive. And that's the danger of, oh, you combine your income and liberty stuff, and that's all you do. Now, all of a sudden, your perverse incentive there is, ooh, I got to say the popular thing, or I'm going to lose subscribers. I'm going to lose, people coming to my shows. So it's a very serious issue. And, it's something that me and my wife like to insulate ourselves from. And that's why we don't make our liberty stuff like our major income or anything like that. We have outside work. So that way it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, I can say things that are offensive to you by being principled. And guess what? I don't care. I don't have to worry that, oh, you're not going to support my next music video or some nonsense. Because we're here to actually be principled. We're not here to tell people what they want to hear and give them sweet lies or halfway compromises. And that's what many of these people do, is they tell these sweet lies and halfway compromises to make you feel comfortable, not push them too far, but, be in that nice comfort zone of populist sentiment. So it aggravates me to no end every time, you know what I mean, when I see that.
I sometimes wonder how many people really do have sincere beliefs, but my honeymoon if I had a honeymoon with the Mises Caucus, the honeymoon ended when and Dave and Ron Paul and Dave Smith both threw Mark Victor under the bus. When he, running for Senate in Arizona, or running to be the senator from Arizona. And this was, the ballots in every state, I believe, are sealed 30 days. So, sealed in the sense of your name's on the ballot 30 days before the election, it's on the ballot. The ballots are not changed. And then early voting had already started. And this is just so typical for the Libertarian Party. Oh, we're going to tell somebody to drop out. I mean, I've seen the Libertarian Party shoot itself in the foot for years. When I wanted to reason, I didn't say, let's stop shooting ourselves in the left foot and start shooting ourselves in the right foot. I said, let's stop shooting ourselves in the foot. And I said over 20 years ago, the LP couldn't sell ice water in the middle of the Sahara. I still see it that way. And you tell somebody to drop out of a race after early voting has started. That's idiotic, completely idiotic. But of course, Ron Paul said it. And this seems to be the whole thing, is that the Mises Caucus, is this Ron Paul cult. And it's funny because it's just like, a smoker changing brands of cigarettes. Suddenly the Ron Paul cult morphed into the Donald Trump cult.
Some of them did. I don't think that would describe all of them. I would say there was a lot of people who I think that they were just so angry at the current establishment of the leftist globalists that they were so desperate to watch somebody mock them and bring them down that's why they saw their hero in Trump. It's just that obviously Trump is not those things. Trump is a brilliant panderer and someone who knows how to succeed at winning people over. He's absolutely brilliant at that. That's how come he's been able to be a billionaire, a successful entertainer in terms of, mass media entertainment, and president, right? He didn't get to those things by not having some wisdom and some insight and some tactics at knowing how to win people over and knowing how to get deals done. You know what I mean? I think some people are like, oh, he's just stupid. I'm like, no, he's not. He's not stupid. He has bad information, but he certainly knows how to think quickly. He certainly knows how to get stuff done for his ends. Now, what are his ends? Are they libertarian ends? No, they're not. They're the most typical American nationalist, protectionist things you can, possibly imagine. Bad economics, bad foreign policy in terms of still being about sending money and arms to other governments and playing these trade war games. Yes, maybe he might be more resistant to starting new war things potentially. But I said this on a show the other day. Realistically, I think that he will, do whatever he thinks he needs to do to save his face if any political body or group does something against him. You know what I'm saying? Like, if he tries to negotiate peace or a deal and someone else betrays that, I wouldn't put it past him to send money, send troops, whatever, make sure that he looks like he is the strongest. That's what I personally see. Yeah. It's not that he's going out of his way to do something, but I would imagine, based on his rhetoric, based on what we already know from being president, he's not above saying, no, I'm not sending money. I'm not sending arms. I'm not sending troops. You know what I mean? It's not something you could reliably say, given his rhetoric and his actual past actions in office. Yeah. The most empirical things you could possibly look at to judge a person's character and mindset. So
he's so erratic. I mean, Jay Bhattacharya could certainly be a very positive appointment, and the fact that he once called Milei my favorite president, I think, is very positive. But other than that, I'm worried. I think escalating Israel, and it's not like Trump was an unknown quantity. We had him for 4 years, so we knew what we were getting into. And one reason also why I bring up the old Mark Victor thing was, Mark Victor sued the state of Hawaii to get rid of their mask mandates. So I'm thinking to myself, this is one of the few people in the Libertarian Party who actually did some work against the coronavirus nonsense. Why is anybody in the Mises Caucus throwing him under the bus? That to me said, well, I guess it's like, what are the priorities? And it seems to me as though the one priority of the Mises Caucus has been, we all have to worship Ron Paul. And this was, of course, one of the crimes of Chase Oliver, was that Chase Oliver didn't think that Ron Paul was God. And it seems as though we have to follow. Other than that, I don't really know what the agenda was. I mean, sometimes I wonder if this was the plan for the Mises Caucus all along, but other times I just wonder if they're just kind of wandering like a blind man in a candy shop, or a blind man in a glass shop, and just knocking stuff over, and they don't even know what's happening. And I'm much more inclined to the blind man in a glass shop right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it was about like whether you worship Ron Paul or anything like that. But yes, the group was certainly about Ron Paul, and certainly if someone was actively mocking Ron Paul and dismissing him and calling him generalizations of like, you're a racist or bigger other nonsense, then yes, there would be pushback against that. But I do think that in their making alliances, I think that they have screwed themselves and they've entangled themselves too much in other organizations, groups. Whether it was things that they did for the Rage Against the War, part 1 and part 2, what they're doing, with RFK, then Trump, they've compromised too much in those ways where they've communicated to the organization that they're not worthy on their own. And I think that's not understood, is that when you're doing those types of deals, you're telling the org, we're not good enough, go support other people. We can't get anything done right. We can't pick the right people. We're failures. And it's just the wrong way to pivot. You know what I mean? If you have financial trouble, the idea is to make it fun and exciting and do something creative and that brings people together. You don't go and then intertwine your messaging with people who are against your values, and people who hate you, with people who are just looking to co-opt what you have and bring those voters in, or bring those sign waivers in, or donors in, whatever it is. So, I think that's just a fundamental thing for anybody to recognize, is you don't intertwine yourself with people who hate you. That is organizational, life ending. And that's happened with LPMC, and it's happening with the LP. And it doesn't mean they can't go on surviving, but their survival is going to end up only coming from doing things that betray those original missions. That, you know, the compromising won't be able to be stopped if they want to be successful unless someone replaces them, because they will have lost that other support, and now their only support is by going to the outsiders and saying, "Oh, we'll praise you, we'll support you. Yeah, just, you know, let us do a joint fundraiser, or let us do a joint event so we can try to."
Yeah, I didn't really want to talk at all about the joint fund because I'm not really familiar. I try to stay on topics that I really know. I don't really know how joint fundraisers work, but you know, but you know, there's also that thing, you know, where when the radio station plays a song over and over again, and eventually you just get sick and tired of hearing that song. I think for a lot of people in the movement, Ron Paul has gotten to that point.
I don't agree with that.
You know, my show is called the Fountainhead Forum. There are people that I respect who hate Ayn Rand. I don't know anybody. The Mises Caucus definitely doesn't. I mean, the Mises Caucus wants the LP to be the Ron Paul loyalty to club, and it's not loyalty to any one guru.
Well, I mean, I think that is right. That can't work for the LP because fundamentally the LP is broader than just Ron Paul, and Ron Paul is not, you know, here forever. He's obviously, you know, nearing his sunset years, probably very soon because he's about 90. So, I mean, of course, I wish him well, and he lives long, but it's just realistically, you know, he is very decrepit, and there's going to need to be more people who rise to the occasion, who do good work on his scale of reaching people in the mainstream. And there are, but certainly holding hopes just, you know, for him is kind of silly, of course. You know, it's the hero worship, you know, should be tempered with the realities of human being limitations and what's necessary to keep changing the culture. And I would say where we might have some agreement on this, and I'm not even sure if it's Ron Paul personally, because I think it might be handlers like Dan, but dismissing and downplaying other successful people. So, for example, Javier Milei, knocking him and hating on him is an example of that type of self-destructive you know, action, where instead there's certain people who have hated on Javier Milei for all the wrong reasons. You know, instead of saying, "Oh, wow, this guy's actually out there promoting Austrian economics. He's actually teaching people economics lessons." Like, that's how he did it. He didn't sit there and just say what he wanted to hear. He actually did education. He, you know, did it in incredible and wild ways, you know, surprised everybody, you know, by being flamboyant and a funny character, being angry on camera and being charismatic, you know. So I think that dismissing that, I think, is a big problem, and downplaying that. I'm not saying I don't know that Ron Paul himself has actually done as much as maybe it was Dan McAdams, his handler.
They're different. I think there are some valid criticisms of Milei out there, but I don't. That's a small minority that's hardly worth talking about. But also just upplaying successes that were, you know, achieved by people outside the Mises Caucus. I mean, the Mises Caucus has never said a word about Donald Rainwater, who was the most successful gubernatorial candidate the LP ever had in Indiana in 2020. And Indiana is actually one of the best affiliates, and of course, the Mises Caucus hasn't taken over there, so that's probably going to continue. But you know, it's really almost, now that the Mises Caucus sees itself as the liberty movement, there's really no liberty movement outside of it. You know, and on a personal note, I've gotten into arguments with people about this. I think John Locke is pretty worthless. You know,
the philosopher.
Yes, I think. Yeah,
I disagree.
I've read him. He's not very good, and I've certainly gotten into debates about that. You know, but again, I don't think it requires loyalty. You can hate Ayn Rand, you can hate Bastiat, you can hate Mises. I mean, you can hate Hayek. I mean, I might question why you hate those people, but I don't think that throws you out, because it's not about worshiping certain personalities. Anyway, I think we've covered the Mises Caucus. You want to talk about what you're doing comic book wise and media wise right now? Because you're doing a lot of stuff.
Sure. I certainly love doing things that are more about building and creating than destroying and taking down. You know, love doing whatever I can. I'm going to present my screen here, if that's all right. I'm going to share.
Yeah, go ahead.
This so you can see here just what I'm talking about. All right. I think you're able to pull that on up. Able to add that to the
I have
show.
to add that to the stage, or
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Perfect. So Voluncap one shot. So part of what we like to do in terms of doing things in the culture and having fun is a comic book series. And this is a part of our Voluntaryist universe, which this has been very successful, on my terms at least. I've been doing this for over 10 years. Our current campaign for our latest issue is actually 135% funded. So that's awesome. And this is a new series that we just launched. It's about a competitive shooter, Mishi Michalak, and she ties into the Voluntaryist universe in certain ways. And it's kind of exciting because competitive shooting is not really normally covered in comic books or any major entertainment. And that's because most of the time in comic books and major entertainment, the people who use guns tend to be something like government workers of sorts, like FBI, CIA, or military or ex-military. There's very little celebration of private gun use. And so having someone who's a competitive shooter in the private world, I think is awesome. It makes for an epic story. And it also makes for an interesting intertwining to the larger Voluntaryist universe. So we have voluncap.com where we have kind of a teaser for this. And, you can read about that there. And then once you click on the link, it actually takes you to the Indiegogo campaign, which just opened up a couple days ago. And on there, you can see our first ever animated teaser trailer for this series. We actually just had our first animated teaser trailer for Voluntaryist, but this is now our second, and it's the first one for the series. And we already have 8 backers, up to 7% of gold. Just opened just a couple days ago. We were actually at a comic book convention this past weekend promoting it and talking about it. So it's really cool. There's a lot of different ways you can join in, whether it's the print comic, you can get a sticker, bookmark, you can get a limited edition cover, and there's also a holofoil cover, which is by, and this is a nice interior page here to give you a little sneak peek of that beautiful art. So the special holofoil cover there is done by Rippaverse artist Igor Teixeira. He's their lead graphic artist. It's not a Rippaverse official item, but he's just been so kind to work with us over the years. He even did my nonfiction book first cover. So there's a cover variant there that you can pick up. And there's also advertisements. So if you want to advertise to our fan base, you can definitely pick up an ad there and reach a bunch of different people. So, just really exciting times, for what we're doing with this new series. And very thankful, too, for, people who have been on the Voluntary Suit Saga 2 series. There's only 3 days left on that, and we're at 135% of goal. That's obviously been successful here on Indiegogo. So super excited for that as well.
So many of why do so many of the women in your comics remind me of Foe?
Well, in Voluntary One Chat, she is German and Japanese. So Foe is actually Chinese and Vietnamese. So I don't know, maybe if you see any resemblance there, maybe it's just that she's got a little bit of Hapa to her. But obviously Foe is full Asian. But it's a fun character. She's, been a lifetime, you could say, competitor training since she was 6 years old. And that's another thing too, is I like my series to have reason as to why someone is good at what they do, not just, they're magically good for no reason. So, she's been a competitive shooter practicing since she was a child, worked her way up to a national stage. So it's a fun way to engage in the culture and to, get inspired and to see little Liberty seeds in there. And that's what we like doing. We like helping make Liberty culture more fun, engaging, and dynamic, because the status culture is just everywhere. You know what I mean? That it's so grand, it's assumed in everything.
I think it's important to go out to sci-fi conventions too, because you're actually going to get out there and talk to people who are not with us, and you got to get out. This is where this kind of stuff works, is because it gets out to everybody. In fact, I wouldn't want to get branded as a libertarian. I just want to get branded as somebody who tells a good story and puts stories out there,
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool. I mean, we reached a lot of people when we went tabling this past weekend. We were at a pop culture convention, and of course, lots of people didn't know who we were, and we gave them little, flyers, and they, took pictures of our stuff and checked it out. So it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I think we can probably take this down now, but that's really cool stuff. It's it's got a lot of good work to be proud of here. It's certainly, and you've put out some videos and some other things. It's a whole lot of good work. I don't know if there's anything else left we need to talk about here. It's been an enlightening talk. I wonder sometimes if everybody's going to hate me after some of the things I say after the next few weeks, but
I'm used to the hate. I
yeah.
bask in it. So I don't shy away from the controversy. I think that if you don't stand up for your principles and say, you know, what people are doing that's wrong or betraying their promises, then what are you even here for? You know what I mean? You're not actually holding people accountable, and you're calling what's good evil, what's evil good, and devaluing and diminishing all the hard work that so many people have done to try to get people to be principled, to try to get people to understand libertarian ethics, the NAP, and, you know, Austrian economics. It's not right. It's a disservice to those who came before and who are, you know, active now, who are trying to put out a principled message, to have these people come in and then put on the face, you know, put on a mask essentially and pretend, oh yeah, we're one of you guys, and then completely destroy that message and then tell everybody, oh, you're stupid for being libertarian. You should just be, you know, Republican and vote for Trump. And if you don't, you're the problem. And it's like, okay, that's awesome. So you just want the government to grow in your preferred ways, and you don't give a crap, you know, that that things are still going to, you know, crap, and literally the government's still taxing us to death, and the entitlements are going to the roof, and the dollar's going to crash because of this nonsense. It's like, you know, what if you haven't done anything material to help anybody become principled and think outside the state and think about how to get their kids out of the, you know, the statist brainwashing in public schools? You know, they're just literally worthless. So
sometimes I think that the crypto people are doing more for liberty than anybody else here. There's a lot of, you know, and I'm not, he doesn't like me, but I remember Matt Erickson said something well, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, if arguing with people like Nick Sarwark and Archie Flower is your strategy for liberty, you need to find something better to do. Those weren't his exact words, but that was, and I thought a lot about that. I said, you know, Matt, you're right. I mean, and like I said, Matt doesn't like me. He's blocked, but Matt Erickson has a lot of good one-liners that are very memorable, and that's one of them. You know, and we've seen a lot of these people, you know, go over to the post-libertarians and the other things. I think people are frustrated. I think they're angry, but I also think we're now, libertarianism is always a positive movement, but it's always easy to find villains, and you sometimes can go from forgetting what your vision is and then just work, and you get to this point where you're just totally focused on punishing the person you hate, and that's where you become evil. It's a very hard struggle, but, you know, and it's often easier to do that too. I think it's easier to punish the bad guys than it is to build something. But
yeah, I mean, destroying is certainly easier than building.
Jack, it's something I noticed a long time ago. Why do I seem to be happier when a team I hate loses than when seeing the team I like win? I mean, why am I laughing harder about, you know, somebody, you know, like I'm in a good mood because Notre Dame lost, and I wonder where does that come from, and is that necessarily a positive thing? You know, I remember I have a lot of disagreements with Peter Brimlow, but I remember reading his very negative obituary of William F. Buckley, and that still sticks in my head. And I said, oh, I love this obituary, you know, because William F. Buckley was a truly horrible, horrible person. But, you know, or reading this article that, you know, about various conspiracy theories and intelligence, all because it was very negative about Ernest Hemingway, because I had to read Hemingway back in school, and that's the surest way to make a kid hate somebody is to make them read. Yeah, that's another question I got to ask you, Jack. I mean, let's say you're a novelist. What would you do if you found out, hey, this teacher's making my kid read these books in schools, but it's like, well, that's nice, but, you know, I don't want you to force kids to read my book. Wouldn't you feel that way too? You know, it's like,
oh, definitely, yeah. I'm against compulsory schooling, so I definitely would not approve of someone forcing through threat, shame, ultimatums, or beatings, reading any of my books. I'd be very upset to hear that. I'd be like, what's wrong with you? Please don't do that.
Comic books are, you know, comic books are an amazing art form. And have you been to Dragon Con by chance?
I have. I was there, I think 2013.
Okay. I was there to the last one. I'll tell you what, Dragon Con is kind of crazy.
Oh yeah, it's real crazy.
It's almost gotten too big, but it's definitely worth seeing once. And and you can find a lot of different. I mean, it's really just a big comic book, sci-fi shows. You'll see all kinds of costumes. There was one really cool panel discussion where they talked about Charlie Chaplin. I mean, that was I saw another woman actually just dressed up as a Bring It On cheerleader, and I just thought, it's really amazing what people put into their fandom. It can be a wonderful thing, and it definitely brings people together. You need something else to notice, Jack. And I've worked on sci-fi conventions myself. These are and a lot of times they're volunteers, but they can keep volunteers around for 10 and 20 years. Why can't the Libertarian Party keep all of its volunteers around like that?
Because they give them something worth being a part of. See, the volunteers at the comic conventions, they get special access. They have the chance to educate others, to show off their creativity. A lot of times the Libertarian Party, with volunteers, they don't give them that recognition, or they don't give them that opportunity or access. And sometimes, worst case scenario, I've had this happen to me even, they take it for granted and then act like you never did anything. I think that's probably one of the things that has made me the most angry.
Maybe that's part of it, but yeah, I don't know.
There's one person who is like, oh, what have you done? I'm like, dude, you literally, on your podcast, your picture that you use for it is one I shot of you with my equipment and edited for you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I help people in many different ways, financially or advice or donate with this or that with pictures or editing or something, whatever they need. And then he's like, oh, and he got all angry. He took down his picture that I shot of him that he was using as his, promotional stuff. And I said, this is exactly why the LP struggles, is because there's these very toxic, entitled people who believe that everything is owed to them. And then they ignore that the hand that feeds them. And then they're like, oh, well, what do you do? And it's this constant, what do you do nonsense.
Yeah.
And they don't even take the time to step back and realize that, you know what, there's different people who do little things, and they do little things repeatedly, but you take away those little things and you'll have nothing, because it is those little things that add up. The person who gives $25 here and $25 there, the person who donated an item here or there, the person who just helped with setup, the person who did a little video work for you or photo work for you to help promote your event. Yeah, it's not the biggest thing in the world, but if you don't have those things and you don't have the resources, you don't have the people who want to come vend and spend money with you, you don't have the people who want to promote you, you look like garbage. And the people who are doing all their canvassing and stuff, they have crap websites. They have horrible pictures that are like 2 pixels. And they complain. They sit there and like, oh, why don't we have anything good? It's like, because you're not grateful. You have zero gratitude for the people like me who would help you out, who would literally give you, top tier photography or a video, this or that you would pay hundreds, thousands of dollars for. Zero gratitude, zero recognition. You shove us out. And that happens every time. And so we're sick of it. We're tired of it. We're tired of the people treating us like crap for that and just gaslighting us, and saying, oh, you don't do anything. We're just like, okay. I wrote the Libertarian Party's 5,000 word issues platform for them. And we did editing, multiple rounds of review behind the scenes, sat for months. They didn't do anything with it. I'm like, hey, you guys going to put something like it eventually. And then they just ghost us. So they have me write a 5,000 word document for them. And then they don't use it. And then they ghost us. That's the kind of crap that gets people to be like, I'm done with you. You know what I mean? Total disrespect, total ignorance. It's unacceptable. And it's maddening. So, they're going to keep shooting themselves in the foot and burn bridges. So there's none left. And then they're going to find out the hard way, as they are, that once you've done that, your only monetization avenue left is to sell out to people who technically hate you. And they want actually to just take whatever little bit you have left, the crumbs, and add that to their stockpile of political power.
My volunteer. I don't know if I'll volunteer at the big Bitcoin conference again after 2024, because they just gave us these generic name tags and they didn't even give us lanyards. There weren't that many. Other than getting in free, there just weren't that many benefits to doing it. But anyway, this has been a good talk. I think this is about, and so we can find you at voluncap.com. And where else can we find you out there?
Jack V. Lloyd, JACKV is in Voluntaryist, Lloyd,
Yes.
LLOYD, jackvloyd.com. That's kind of my personal page where you can see music videos, memes, all that good stuff. And of course, website for the main comic book series, volcomic.com. V is in Voluntaryist, VOLCOMIC, volcomic.com. So but either way, I'm all over the internet. You can Google any of my stuff. You can Google Voluncap. You can pre-search Voluncap, whatever. And I'll come up because we just do that much. And our latest music video is really fun too. You should check that out. And the Fed, we shot that one in DC just before the Libertarian convention. Is a real fun video.
Okay, yes. Well, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, check out my Substack, go buy my novel Escape from the Village, and go to buy me a coffee. I'm Chris Baker. We're out. Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.